All right, today we're going to look at literature through a completely new lens. We're putting on our psychoanalyst hats and using the ideas of one of the most influential and controversial thinkers of all time, Sigmund Freud, to uncover the hidden stories that lie just beneath the surface of the books we love. You know that feeling, right? You're deep into a book, reading about a character in some made-up world, but something about their struggle, their desire, their fear, it just hits you. It feels so familiar, it's almost a little unsettling. Well, today, we're going to dive into exactly why that happens. So, to really get to the bottom of that powerful connection, we have to start with a huge shift in how people thought about literature. It's often called the psychological turn. See, before Freud came along, critics mostly treated a book like it was just an object, something to be analyzed on its own. But with this psychological turn, the whole game changed. The text itself becomes a clue. It's seen as a symptom of the author's own mind, their hidden conflicts, their secret desires, their unconscious. The story is the evidence, and we, the readers, get to be the detectives. And what's really interesting is that Freud himself was pretty humble about all this. He basically said, hey, I didn't invent the idea of the unconscious. The poets and artists have known about it for centuries. What he believed he did was create a kind of scientific map, a method to explore that hidden territory that artists had always navigated by instinct. And that brings us to the map itself. Because if we're going to understand the secret psychology of a story, we first need to get a handle on Freud's two big ideas for how the human mind is structured. First up, you've probably seen this one, the iceberg. The tiny little tip that you can see above the water, that's your conscious mind, whatever you're thinking about right now. Just below the surface is the preconscious, stuff you could bring to mind if you wanted to. But the real action is in that massive, hidden part of the iceberg underwater. That is the unconscious. It's this vast, deep place where our primal desires, our deepest fears, and our repressed memories all live, pulling the strings without us even realizing it. Now, inside that mind, there is a constant, raging battle going on. On one side, you have the id. This is your pure, primal instinct. It wants what it wants, and it wants it now. On the other side is the superego. That's the voice of your parents, of society, all the shoulds and shouldn'ts. And then, stuck right in the middle, is the poor ego, the rational part of you just trying to broker a peace deal between these two. And that endless conflict, that's the engine for basically all human drama. Okay, so if most of our mind is this locked, unconscious basement, how do we ever get a peek inside? Well, Freud famously said that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. And for our purposes, he argued that a piece of literature works in exactly the same way. We can analyze it just like a dream. Here's how it works. Every dream, and therefore every story, has two layers. First, there's the manifest content. That's the surface-level stuff, the plot, what literally happens. But underneath all that is the latent content, and that's the hidden true meaning, usually some kind of repressed wish or fear that's too intense for our conscious minds to deal with head-on. So how does that shocking stuff from the basement get past the security guard of your conscious mind? Through a process Freud called the dream work. You can think of it like an internal sensor. It takes all this raw, forbidden material from the unconscious and scrambles it, disguising it with symbols so it can sneak past our defenses without sounding any alarms. And writers, according to Freud, are basically masters of this process. So how does this scrambling actually happen? Well, Freud gives us a sort of decoder ring with two key tools. First, there's condensation. This is a lot like a metaphor. It's when one single image in a story or dream is packed with multiple, sometimes contradictory ideas. Then you have displacement. This is where the emotional energy gets shifted from its real target to a safer substitute. So maybe you're really angry at your boss, but in your dream, or in the story, the hero is fighting a monstrous tyrant. Same feeling, safer target. Okay, let's put this decoder ring to use and look at a really specific feeling that literature can create. That creepy, unsettling vibe you get from a good ghost story. Freud had a special term for this, the uncanny. Now, to get at this idea, Freud did this brilliant deep dive into the German word heimlich. At first, it just means what it sounds like, homely, familiar, something belonging to the home. But then it starts to take on another meaning, secret or hidden away. And then the weirdest thing happens. The word becomes so twisted that it ends up meaning the same thing as its own opposite, unheimlich, which we translate as uncanny. And that right there is the key. For Freud, the uncanny isn't about something new or alien being scary. It's the chilling feeling you get when something old and familiar, something you thought you had buried and repressed long ago, suddenly comes back to life and confronts you. It's the secret that was supposed to stay hidden inside the home, suddenly breaking out. Freud's absolute go-to example was this terrifying story called The Sandman. Now, on the surface, it's about a kid's fear of a monster who steals children's eyes. But Freud says, wait, why that fear? He argues the fear of losing your eyes is a classic case of displacement. It's a symbolic stand-in for a much deeper, more primal fear from childhood, connected to the father figure and punishment, a fear he called castration anxiety. The reason the story is so chilling, so uncanny, is because it taps into this powerful, repressed terror and lets it bubble back up to the surface. This all leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, and the most famous part of the theory. If all stories are really dreams with a hidden meaning, and that meaning is often a repressed wish or fear, then what is the ultimate repressed story that Freud saw hiding under almost everything? For Freud, it's the Oedipus complex. In his view, this wasn't just one story among many, it was the foundational story. It's about that early family triangle, a child's repressed desire for one parent and a sense of rivalry with the other. He believed this was the first place we all learn about love, authority, jealousy, and the rules of society, and it gets burned into our unconscious. And the classic literary example is Shakespeare's Hamlet. I mean, why can't he just avenge his father? He hesitates and hesitates. The Freudian reading is that Hamlet is totally paralyzed because the villain, his uncle Claudius, has already done the very thing Hamlet unconsciously wanted to do himself: get rid of his father and take his place with his mother. Seeing his own repressed wish acted out in the real world just completely short-circuits him. Okay, so what is the big takeaway from all of this? Why does it matter? Because this way of reading gives us a powerful explanation for that question we started with. It helps explain the immense emotional grip that stories have on us, even when the plot has seemingly nothing to do with our actual lives. At the end of the day, we're moved by a story like Hamlet not because we're Danish princes, but because the story's conflict touches on that universal, repressed family drama that, according to Freud, is silently playing out in the deep, hidden parts of our own minds. So, the next time you're reading a book and you get that strange personal feeling of connection, just stop and ask yourself, what's the manifest story here? And what's the latent one? What secret stories are hiding in your favorite books?